Well, hello to everyone. This is Linda from Spirited Seniors. I want to do a video today about Justin Trudeau, since the elections are just around the corner, you know. When I went on the internet to find out more information, I ran into another YouTuber named Adam Danielle Mezé. And on his YouTube channel, he's got a list of Trudeau crimes, and he's got it all in 3 videos actually, but he has quite an extensive list in his first video, which I'm going to show you a little clip of, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and then I'm going to come back and address some of the crimes, at least the first number 1 to 6 crimes, maybe in a little bit more detail, as I found a little bit more information about it. So if you please listen to his little clip.
I thank Carol for actually supplying this list recently. We're going to be doing more of this kind of stuff in the future, where you guys are going to be supplying me with things that you want me to talk about, expand upon, expound upon, whatever the case may be, in addition to my own presentations and my own entertaining little screeds and rants and whatever, you know, conversations, talks, dialogues, parlays. This kind of thing is going to be coming through. These kind of emails and these kind of suggestions are going to be talked about here on this vlog. These are Trudeau's crimes. It's a long, long list. It's a litany. I hope that you guys are ready for this. This is not going to be too much editorializing on my part unless I feel like I have to say something about something. So get ready, drop your socks and grab your cocks. Here it goes. Number 1. Publicly admonished a woman in Edmonton for using the word mankind instead of peoplekind. Number 2, veterans asking for too much. Number 3, the budget will balance itself. The 2016-17 budget deficit was $17.8 billion, moving up to $18.1 billion by the end of 2019 and rising. Number 4, Canada has no core identity. Number 5, obsession with Indian wedding clothes, Bollywood dancing. Number 6, invites Jaspal Atwal, a Sikh extremist who served 5 years in a Canadian jail for his role in the attempted murder of a visiting Indian cabinet minister, Malkiat Singh Sadhu.
So that was the first 6 on his list of many. I believe the list goes up into the 90s, doesn't quite hit the 100. I think it comes up to 94 or 96. I can't remember quite. Anyways, I'm going to concentrate a little bit on number 1. We all know what happened. I'm just going to read a little bit from The Guardian then. And it says over here, Canadian Prime Minister draws ridicule for being too politically correct, though it may have been lighthearted sarcasm. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has come under fire for mansplaining and being too politically correct after he interrupted a woman and lightheartedly corrected her for saying mankind, not peoplekind, at a town hall in Canada on Friday.
That religious charitable organizations have in our legislation so that it can also be changed, because maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look into
we
that.
would like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because
yeah.
it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly. Yes, thank you.
We can all learn from each other. Okay, charitable status, there is a fairly rigorous process. Sorry.
I'm
yes.
very sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I just had
thought
one
the
more
question was about
too,
charitable
that I must
status.
ask you.
Yes.
His correction came at the conclusion of a long-winded question from an audience member that, over the course of 3 minutes, included a discussion of her church and the special power of maternal love. The questionnaire ended by asking Trudeau to look at laws surrounding the charitable status of religious organizations, saying maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind, to which Trudeau replied, people kind. His comments have drawn ridicule from conservative media who seized on them to accuse him of virtue signaling, being too politically correct, and for mansplaining, a term coined by a feminist author and popularized by feminist discourse. The Fox News dedicated a section to the controversy, enlisting the help of Jordan Peterson, a Canadian professor who has found fame after arguing against political correctness, especially the use of preferred pronouns.
There is out there an appetite against political correctness, which is what you have described this as. In fact, your YouTube video is called Professor Against Political Correctness. But let's make sure we're all speaking the same language here. You would define that how? Political correctness.
Well, I think it's a particular kind of ideological game, and I think the outcome is twofold. It's to make the player feel morally superior, and also to take rather serious axe swings at the foundation of society. And so the game is identify a domain of human endeavor, note that there's a distribution of success. Some people are doing comparatively better and some people are doing comparatively worse. Define those doing worse as victims. Define those doing better as perpetrators. Identify with the victims. Have yourself a set of enemies handy to vent your resentment on. Feel good about it, even though it didn't really require any work on your part, and then endlessly repeat. And that's why I've seen that happening on campuses in particular for the last 30 years.
In your YouTube talk, you describe those who oppose you on this issue as, quote, resentful and uninformed.
Yes.
Tell me why you think that's accurate.
Well, I worked for the NDP when I was a kid. From the time I was 14 to the time I was 18, I worked with Rachel Notley's father and her mother and knew them very well. And I actually found them very admirable people, as well as the other people on the socialist end of the distribution who were genuinely working for the rights of working class people, coming out of that Saskatchewan tradition that established health care and pension and all of that. But I noted at the same time that the party functionaries, let's say, weren't that sort of person at all. They didn't really like the working class. They weren't standing up for them, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it until I read George Orwell's Road to Whig and Peer, which is a brilliant book, and which was written for the Left Book Club in the UK. And he was talking about the failures of socialism in the United Kingdom, and then discussed intellectual socialists of the type who didn't exactly like the poor. Okay. They just hated the rich.
Resentful and uninformed, though.
Yes, well, the resentful part is the willingness to pull down any structure that's hierarchical because of resentment about not being on the top. And uninformed is, well, it's the consistent attempt to force every political issue into into the domain encompassed and viewed through this single lens.
And I agree with Jordan Peterson too. You know, I wish he'd put his hat in the ring and run. Seriously. Anyways, getting on to number 2, which is the way Trudeau has been treating our vets. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal government has left more than $372 million meant to help veterans and their families unspent since taking office in November 2015. The news comes 7 months after an Edmonton town hall at which Trudeau publicly acknowledged some veterans groups fighting the government for improvement benefits, saying they were asking for more than we are able to give right now. I don't see why. Yet according to documents obtained by Global News, the Department of Veterans Affairs, VAC, under Trudeau's leadership, has failed to spend all the money given to it in each of the past 3 years, something Trudeau and many other Liberals slammed former Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the Conservatives for when they were still in office. And Trudeau campaigned on, they left unspent more than $1 billion that Parliament allocated for veteran support. Canadians know that this is wrong. A government led by me would make it right. Yeah? And what happened? Why do we have vets who are sitting on the street starving? Explain that one to me. Well, Reagan, the current Minister of Veteran Affairs, since taking power, has reopened Veteran Affairs Office closed by the Conservatives, rehired hundreds of frontline staff, improved benefits, and increased overall spending for veterans by about $10 billion. The government has also committed an additional $42 million to help reduce the backlog of those waiting for disability benefits, he said. Yeah. Why, like I said, why are they sitting on the street? Why are they starving? There is no reason for a vet to have to wait for a medical, to have to wait for money. They gave up what they could, and some of them gave up more than others. And some of them never came back to collect. I suppose the Liberal... Okay, now let's see if Trudeau knows how to balance a budget. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau should explain to Canadians how he went from his 2015 election promise to balance federal budget this year to his own finances department's latest projection. It won't be balanced till the year 2040. Back in 2015, Trudeau was adamant that under his economic stewardship, Canada would have a balanced budget this year. After the election in 2015, in an interview with Canadian press, Trudeau repeated his promise to balance the budget in 2019, saying it was cast in stone. I think, quote, I think one of the things that Canadians expect is a level of fiscal responsibility that we've been able to demonstrate in the past, and we're certainly going to demonstrate in the future, Trudeau said. In fact, Trudeau promised that not only would his government have a balanced budget in 2019, but a surplus of $1 billion. Now here's Trudeau's actual record. To get to that number, Trudeau blew past every one of these 2015 promises to get a balanced budget in 2019. So he wanted to have a surplus of $1 billion or over $1 billion, and he ended up with a deficit of $19.8 billion now. I think it's a tad more than what it used to be. Yes. Both Trudeau and the finance minister, Bill Morneau, now insist the more significant figure when it comes to budgetary deficits isn't the actual size of the deficit, but Canada's debt to GDP ratio. The lower the better. But his ratio is up this year to 30.7%. It was 27% before. Meanwhile, the latest projection from Trudeau's finance department, released in December of 2018, projects the federal budget won't be balanced until 2040. It says in 2040, Canada will record a $1.7 billion surplus. He promised that for this year, remember, at which point the total federal debt will be almost $96 billion compared to... Okay, let's talk about our pipeline, or let's say our non-pipeline. The Trudeau government worries about layoffs at General Motors in Ottawa, but they don't give a second thought to the hundreds of thousands of unemployed people in Alberta. Higher corporate taxes in Canada and the shortage of pipeline capacity to get Alberta's oil to markets outside North America are the reason Albertans are out of work. And Trudeau has nothing to do with that, of course. The Trudeau government's decision to impose a price on carbon pollution, as well as to other proposed legislation will further hurt Alberta's ailing energy industry. And they listened to the speeches from right-wing politicians who promised to make their voices heard in the nation's capital. Trudeau's Liberals have said that they are trying to strike a balance that restores public trust and credibility to major project reviews in the wake of mounting public opposition to pipeline projects and setbacks from court decisions that have reversed federal approvals of two major West Coast oil pipeline projects. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, who was initially alone in opposing the carbon levy through the courts, said that there were now 5 provinces opposed to the tax. 5 conservative premiers, including Moe and Alberta's Jason Kennedy, sent a letter to Trudeau this week voicing concern Bill C-69 and a proposed oil tanker moratorium of BC's northern coast would have detrimental effects on national unity. In an interview, Moe rejected the suggestion that rhetoric regarding federal energy policy was becoming too fiery. It's the Prime Minister who is pushing these divisive policies, he says. He has a letter on his desk and he needs to start reading it. In Ottawa, Trudeau fired back, saying that his government is improving a process that failed under former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Well, I can't say he was the greatest either, was he? Well, there is polling showing that 50% of Albertans can foresee secession from the Federation. And the message to Ottawa: is Canada still a country? How Canada's identity crisis could threaten the U.S. When Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his country is a post-national state and has no core identity, no one should be surprised when some start asking if Canada is even a country. But the identity crisis facing Canada is not only multifaceted, it's also serious and could one day have a direct impact on the U.S. I'd rather hope the U.S. would have a direct impact on us right now. Canada is in the midst of what one writer called a civilizational experiment in which a Western nation is being transformed into a post-Western nation. And this revolution is centered around the cult of diversity. The question is not whether Canada should accept immigrants. The question, according to Toronto Star columnist, is whose values should win the day. In Canada, right now, it's labeled bizarrely xenophobic and anti-immigrant if they throw around terms like racism to no end. And that's just, if you just ask if we can just all get along and be compatible. Throughout their histories, both Canadian and American have welcomed immigrants of all backgrounds. But Canada has said that rather than being a melting pot like the U.S., it's more like a mosaic of many cultures. The problem beginning with the Canadian mosaic includes more and more radical Islams who favor undemocratic values under Sharia law. Well, you know, I don't think there's ever going to be Sharia law in this country. Okay? Prime Minister Trudeau welcomed almost 50,000 refugees from the Middle East last year alone, and has welcomed returning ISIS fighters, saying that in an interview they would be a powerful voice. But for whom? I'm sure it's not for us. A lot of people, probably the silent majority, are saying, I'm unhappy with this, including immigrants who came to Canada to get away from decades of their values in their own countries. Another facet of Canadian. Let's talk about trade agreements, which we have none, I guess. The Prime Minister and his advisors are obsessed with issues that have no relationship with the principles of free trade. Labor rules, culture, gender, and environmental laws have no place in agreements that aim to open up trade. They are at heart attempts to embed social protectionism in agreements that should be focused on free trade in goods and services. So long as these essential anti-free trade theories dominate popular political discussion, there is little chance that trade-enhancing agreements based on free exchange can be reached. I believe that's true. The Trudeau campaign injects labor, gender, environmental, and social chapters into trade deals, and it is an attempt to impose laws on other countries using trade in goods and services. The money stuff as a bargaining chip. If you adopt our labor laws or our laws sanctioned by the UN, International Labor Organization, we will let you sell us your auto parts. That's not free trade. That's trade pressure, and in some ways, it's a form of harassment. No good can come from such trade positions. From progressive trade policies to protectionist trade policies, the world's major trading nations are dealing with ideas and objectives that are anti-free trade. It might lead to troubling uncertainty in the short term, but now seems like a good time for negotiators to take a break until some real free trade comes along. And I guess that's what they're going to do. Because, yes, culture, gender, what's that got to do with free trade? Nothing to do with trade at all. I don't know why, they're trying to inject that in there. But that sounds a little crazy to me. What do you think?